Hi, happy Wednesday. I am Ann Palmer. I am here with Celerity, joined by Jay Brodsky. Jay is the Chief Digital Officer for the American Geophysical Union. Jay, that's kind of a mouthful. Can we just say AGU from here out?
Oh, please do, for sure.
Is that how do you refer to yourselves?
Well, we increasingly try to say AGU for that reason, because we're more than American. We're a global scientific association. Geophysical is, like you said, a mouthful, and no one knows what it means anyhow. And union, I don't know. I keep asking people why we're a union, because we're not a trade union. We're a community of scientists. So I think union in that way. But
I
thanks. It's great to be here.
Yes, welcome.
Yeah, I should say that. Yeah.
Fun fact: I worked for and with geophysicists early in my career, first job. So I have a little unfair advantage of knowing what a geophysicist is and does, although don't ask me to explain exactly. I was going to let you do that. Focus of AGU and the geophysicists there.
Right. So the geophysicists among us, ours study everything from the center of the Earth out to exoplanets. So we don't get too far out into outer space, but we've got a community of 150,000 or so scientists and the science adjacent public from around the globe. And these folks study volcanology and atmospheric sciences and the aforementioned exoplanets and climate change and forest fires and ocean currents and lots of different interesting stuff that oftentimes goes over my head. But it's really great to be with them whenever I can.
We are also grateful for those scientists and the data that they provide. I know the AGU publishes a lot, and right now I'm lucky to have you here for two reasons. One, you're in the middle of your large annual conference, and we will definitely talk about that. And two, when is this football game?
Oh, so football game in 3 hours and 38 minutes, strangely, on a Wednesday afternoon. Yes.
Okay. I don't know if any of the rest of you are following. Is it Steelers-Ravens?
The Steelers-Ravens, yes. Postponed, strangely, to Wednesday. I can't remember when they said the last time there was an NFL game on a Wednesday, but many of us are going to be trying our best to focus on work and simultaneously watch with one eyeball whatever's happening in Pittsburgh. So
got it. So let's move over to the AGU annual meeting. Moved from an in-person event to virtual. This I can't wait to hear about that digital transformation, the impact on the association, on your revenue for changing this event, numbers of people that are there. I think I saw you had posted 7,000 videos involved with the conference. Tell me about it.
So this is normally a big event, probably 40 or 45% of our revenue for the year, and a really important place where our scientists can share their work, interact with their colleagues, their former grad school friends, the people who they collaborate with funders in the arena, with editors at journals, and just basically move their science forward. So normally we'd get together for a week. Last year was in San Francisco. Next year, fingers crossed, it'll be in New Orleans. And for a grueling 5 days, there's just a ton of in-person interaction. Normally, this is sitting in a conference room and listening to someone speak about their work, a panel session, and then you move on to the next one. Or it's a exhibit hall. Last year, the Moscone Center, the entire basement of the Moscone Center, if you're familiar with that, full of people standing in front of big posters, right? 36 by 48 inch piece of paper with science on it. And so we realized, like many in the association community, back in June-ish, that although we would love to be in San Francisco, we would love to be getting together, this was not in the cards, and we were going to have to pivot to a virtual event. And so we did just that. And as of yesterday, we had about 22,000 people signed up for this event. They haven't all logged in yet. Most of the work gets going on next Monday, but we've started some of the sessions yesterday, and there's stuff going on right now as we speak, and hopefully nothing's on fire because there's a lot of new technology. There's a lot of stuff that we raced to get in place. But it's been a great experience, and we're really excited for what's to come out of it.
So on the digital side, what were some of the technology considerations that were most at the forefront of transitioning this in-person event to a digital one?
You know, most of it was trying to think about how people want to communicate and what the best
Mhm.
way to communicate is. You know how it works in physical space. We've been running this meeting for 50 years, and so you kind of have a sense for what a good presentation looks like, or how a poster should be sized or printed out, those sorts of issues. How many push pins even it takes to hold a poster to the poster board. But when you're reinventing yourself in this way, there's so many decisions about how should we best deliver this content? What should the videos look like, and where do we need to store them, and how do we serve them so that our participants from around the globe, from a variety of different countries, from various bandwidth and browser considerations, can view them successfully? How do we uh, recreate these posters in a way that make them accessible to folks who are using screen readers, and so that they can actually interact with the science regardless of their abilities. And so having to think through that, find the appropriate community of vendors and partners who can deliver on this, and then stitch it all together and make sure that the data is flowing successfully across what ended up being 12 different platforms, was really a big chunk of the work these last 6 months.
We talked a little about the strategic plan that was released for AGU for 2020, and one of the values in it is diversity. When you think about this shift from in-person to digital and the impact on revenue and numbers of people who are able to attend a large event or to interact with the AGU in general, how has this digital transformation either increased or decreased the diversity of your audience?
Right. So that has been a part of our strategic plan for years now. Our community has realized that it's not as diverse as we want it to be, that our science as a result isn't as complete as it could be, because we leave aside, or have historically left aside, important voices in terms of solutions for our planet. And so we have had a various number of initiatives in place to try to increase from undergraduate and up, the people who participate in the geosciences. But this year, because of the virtual event, it gave us such a great opportunity to really reach out in a way across the globe that we've never been able to. So a couple of things we've done. We offered free registration for attendees from tier 1 and tier 2 countries. So these are low, middle income countries. And we said, you know what, we'd love to have your voice at the meeting, and here's how you can attend, and we'll just cut the cost to zero. And so as a result, we've got more participation from, say, India than we've ever had before, because the scientists there don't need to hop on a plane, fly 24 hours to San Francisco, pay for 5 nights in a hotel,
Yeah.
figure out how to feed themselves for those 5 days. They could sit at home, and if I'm doing my job, use a limited amount of bandwidth to interact with the content that is on our platforms, and share their own science, and inform the rest of the community what is happening in those communities, those local areas. We also reached out to the North American tribal communities. So we offered free registration to undergraduates and graduates and faculty members at tribal colleges and universities, and have great participation from that audience as well. So we're really excited about really building the diversity of the community, so we all can learn from one another, so we can do a better job of understanding indigenous science, and science that's not just US based, and really drive some of this understanding forward. So in that way, the virtual platform was a great winner for us. And now we're already starting to think about next year, how we plan to include some of this virtual component, so that we can continue that involvement for folks who maybe can't get on a plane and fly to New Orleans next year, where a physical meeting will be held. So that's going to be an interesting challenge.
One of the things that I've been thinking about with the shift to digital from in-person events, and we'll move off this topic in a second, but I was really saddened last week to hear about Tony Hsieh, the CEO of Zappos, passing. He had talked about designing culture and designing collisions into that culture, purposefully creating space so that people would interact and bump into one another, whether really like physically bump into each other so that there could be a free exchange of ideas. How are you designing the digital experience to facilitate those kinds of collisions?
Yeah, that's such a great point. And it's going to be interesting to see how successful we have been, because
Yeah.
that is such an important part of putting 25,000 people in a convention center. You're walking down the hall with your friend and they say, "Oh, wait, you should meet X who I met." And so this way of like making these new connections is more challenging in the virtual space. We've incorporated a few bits of technology to try to drive that. We have
Mm.
a platform called Brain Dates
Yeah.
that enables people to say, "Hey, I'm interested in this topic. Does anybody want to come meet with me?" And sort of make those
Cool.
connections in a really safe way. We've got these other sort of small group meeting areas called pods that similarly can be reserved, and people can say, "Hey, at 2 p.m. this afternoon, we're going to have a conversation about X topic,
Mhm.
turtle tunnels in the Everglades." We do have a scientist who works on that, and see who you can draw in.
Yeah.
There's discussion boards that are set up for continuing the conversations that happen at the Zoom sessions that are going on around certain scientific areas. We have 800, I think this is the number, 800 different scientific conversations
Wow.
that are going to happen over the next 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So, 6 or 8 or 10 scientists will present their work around a certain topic, and then have an hour-long Q&A. And then, when you're done with that, let's go over here into this discussion area and continue the conversation in text form. So, we're trying really hard to
Yeah.
keep those conversations going and try to build that community in a digital form when we can't get together in person.
Um, as a CDO, you are always looking at the data to drive the decisions about what you're doing. Can you offer your perspective on data-driven decisions in leadership?
Oh, it's so key for us, for anyone, right? We have such a heterogeneous community. They're from 100 and some odd countries around the globe. They are early career scientists who are super active on Twitter, to retired, emeritus scientists, former professors who are perhaps interacting with us on Facebook, or maybe just reading our print magazine.
Mhm.
And so really trying to understand that community. The best way we know how is to gather the data, the digital exhaust we get from all of these different platforms, and try and sort through it and figure out, like, what's the best way we can really serve this community, and then experiment. So we have a product that we launched this year that called Channels, which is a way for, again, our scientists to define a topic of scientific interest and then see who will gather around that topic. So they say, I'm really interested in COVID and its impact on the atmosphere. There's
Mhm.
been a bunch of stories out there about, well, maybe carbon dioxide levels are down, or maybe nitrogen dioxide levels are down, or maybe it's going to change the weather because we're not driving as much. And so there's a lot of discussion, a lot of publishing, a lot of issues going around about that. But that draws in people from across our community, and who otherwise are associated with different silos, perhaps in our sciences. And
Yeah.
so these channels are a way to create sort of a gathering place around content and see who comes, birds of a feather, and then trying to build community in that way, so that our scientists can say, like, "Oh, I didn't know you were interested in honeybees. I know a lot about honeybees, and I've been using them to track pollution in Vancouver. Let's work on a project together next year."
Yeah.
So it's using the technology, using the data that comes out of it to try to drive the science forward. And so we'll see. We're watching it, we're monitoring it, we're continuing to push the product forward, and see what we can learn from it and continue to improve it, all with that goal in mind of helping to drive the science forward.
Of engagement. Yeah. So as you're describing those different kinds of birds of a feather, yeah, communities, how do you have a thesis or an hypothesis about how you could use AI and machine learning to look at all of the body of knowledge that your scientists are juggling? Is that something that at least your brain, if not the AGU in general, thinks about?
We've done a little bit of experimentation. Were it not for a global pandemic, I might have been doing more of it this year.
Yeah.
But one of the things we did last year with AI, and as much as there's conversation about bias in AI, this was a way for us to try to turn it on its head. So when an article is submitted for publication, we take that article, we give it to experts in the field, and we say, would you take a look at this and tell us whether you think it's worthy of us publishing it in our journal? But the community of peer reviewers who we turn to tends to be homogenous, right? It's people who we know, people who have reviewed for us in the past, people who maybe have published in one of our journals, and so therefore we know that they're qualified to be in that role. But the downside to that is it kind of is self-reinforcing and doesn't help us with our diversity goals. So we built a tool that would go out and survey a broader category or a broader corpus of content to try to identify potential peer reviewers who maybe we don't know so well, or maybe who haven't published in our journal before, but have presented at one of our meetings, who are every bit as qualified to opine on the quality of this work, but are a little bit outside of our normal group. And so we put this thing in place. We started testing it and running various experiments out of it, and seeing that this is actually helping us to expand our population and drive forward some of these diversity goals that we have. We need to do more work like that. But like I said before, I'm in the middle of hosting 22,000 people at a virtual event. So unfortunately, that had to be put on hold for this year.
That's true. That sounds like just an incredible lift, especially. Did you say that you started planning the virtual event in June? Was when that?
Yeah, we started talking about it in June. I started signing vendor contracts in September.
Wow.
So it's been crazy. I mean, there's some vendors out there who do great work, who I would have loved to work with, who said, you know what, you're crazy. Like, we can't take this work on. We will not be able to deliver for you, which, you kind of appreciate the honesty.
Yeah.
So we dragged this thing across the finish line, and it was a slog, but
tell me about the teamwork.
It's been great.
Tell me about the teamwork that's required to make something like that happen, because I know that it doesn't exist. It doesn't happen just in a vacuum or with one leader. So how do you inspire those teams and keep them moving?
Right. I'm not the only person who has set things aside to accomplish this meeting, right? That we've got a staff of 130 or so, and, probably 85, 90% of us are heads deep or neck deep in this challenge. And so it really has been trying to collaborate with my peers, other executives here at AGU, to really interface with the volunteer leadership of our organization, because after all, we're governed by a set of volunteers, and they all have their own opinions and goals and objectives. And so trying to work with them and make sure that we're achieving what they want out of this meeting. And then, trying to motivate a small team of mine and even bigger team of vendors and partners and folks out there in the community who are just really excited to sign on and say, this is a cool idea. We're ready for this challenge. Let's make it happen. So that's been interesting.
I think you've been answering this question all along, but as a leader with this particular Black Swan event, what went through your mind as we went through lockdown and talk to me about that.
Yeah, that part has been hard, right? I haven't, seen my team in person since March 13th, like everybody else, and trying to make sure that everyone has what they need in difficult circumstances. People have various challenges on their personal front that, are going to take a priority over this, meeting we're having. As important as it is, as much as we all buy into the mission of our organization, we've also got our lives to live. We have our children to school and our parents to worry about. And so, if nothing else, that's been hard for a manager, for me as a manager, to make sure that the team has what they need to be successful, and to make sure that we're clear about what we're trying to achieve and what we expect, and all of that, which is in a regular year also challenging. We'll pick up 100 people and ship them across the country and put them in hotels and work 18-hour days for a week is also hard burden on families, but it's been a bigger burden when you think about these last 9 months.
Yeah. I hear you. I also hear the footsteps of my 11-year-old in the hallway, and I'm thinking like it's very close to home.
Right.
One more question. On your LinkedIn profile, you mentioned that you're a tech guy who gets business, or a business guy who gets tech. This digital transformation has given some membership associations an opportunity to actually increase revenue, especially non-dues revenue, which I know is not the main driver for AGU. What do you see as opportunities on the business side for member associations?
Well, I think this is such an opportunity for us to throw away a lot of old ideas and try new ones. It's painful. It's very difficult for us to say, well, we're just not going to be able to do that meeting this year. We're not going to be able to, execute on our goals the way we normally would, and we need to rethink everything. But what an opportunity. We at AGU are lucky enough that we've got some cushion. We have a relatively large endowment, and it gives us the opportunity to try some things and fail. And so in that way, I'm really in a good position that I could say, well, that didn't work, and set it aside and try something else, and hopefully not lose too much forward momentum, not lose too much money while doing it. But if nothing else, it really gives you a chance to think about how you are operating and reinvent. And unfortunately, doing it, in an environment where all of those other things are going on, like I said, in your personal life is hard. But it's a time where we have no other choice but to rethink, everything. I've heard from a number of my colleagues, I remember at the beginning who were saying, does anybody have a solution for like a lockbox for their checks? Because we have finance people who have to go into the office and check the mail to process the checks. And, thankfully, we had moved past those days already, but, it's the way to go, right? And it's a forcing function, if nothing else, right? That you don't want the finance people to have to go pick up the mail anymore. And so you need to solve that problem. Or, you need to move the servers out of the building and into the cloud. You need to do all sorts of work in terms of digitization, where you're just trying to get your existing processes and make them more efficient and more, run with all the best technology you can muster. And then you can turn to digitalization, right? Building new products with this technology, solving new problems, really meeting your overall strategies, and really tackling larger challenges that'll prepare you for 2021 and beyond.
I think that you just really well described the work that Celerity does. I'm sitting here thinking, wow, this sounds a lot like what we're doing with most of our clients and customers, looking at those processes, reinventing them, figuring out where there were inefficiencies that weren't serving either the employees or the customers well. I have one last question, unless I missed anything. Did I miss anything?
Ooh, I don't think so.
Okay.
We did pretty well.
Books, movies, podcasts. I'm a musician, so happy to hear about the bands, things that have changed you or that you've enjoyed lately.
Oh yeah, this is such a great opportunity, right? Without, although the commute, and I don't have a big commute, but that commute was normally an opportunity to partake of podcasts, And so that has sort of been set aside. That plus all the stress of the election, I just couldn't listen to all the political podcasts I would normally listen to. But it's given me opportunity to read, which I could never do on the train standing. Boy, the most interesting book I read recently is called Midnight at Chernobyl, about the meltdown in Chernobyl. And the stunning thing about it, I think, was what happens for me, and in the role I'm in, what happens to scientists in an authoritarian regime, and what sort of lies do they tell themselves, tell one another, to further the goals of the government, where they say, no, that couldn't possibly be designed incorrectly because it was designed by the greatest minds of the Soviet Empire. You're like, yeah, that might be true, but it just melted down, and we are now moving, 1 million people out of this region of Ukraine and Belarus as a result. And just the process of dealing with truth, scientific truth, in an environment like that, it was scary and fascinating. So, I'd recommend that one.
Was that made into a documentary?
Well, there's that HBO. I don't know. There's that HBO show which I haven't seen.
I think
I'm not sure. There's a whole series of books, but yeah, it was really well done. It was great.
Yep. Remarkable. Jay, I really appreciate you being here. Thank you for the window into AGU and into what it takes to plan to transition large in-person event to an engaging digital one. I know you'll be analyzing all the data after the conference. I can't wait to touch base with you and hear what you learned from this experience. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much for having me. And it's not too late to come. If you want to read or listen to or watch thousands of hours worth of scientific content, you could go. You got
I don't even have
17 days to become a member. No, you don't have to leave your office. It's all available online. It's good
More
stuff.
diversity. I love it.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks again.
Right. I love it. Thanks for having me.
Mm-hmm.